I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the White Castle Duel from De Beer Games. The White Castle Duel is a two-player version of De Beer's White Castle, an incredibly popular, very tight Euro game in which you basically have 9 actions to do everything you need to do. Fortunately, the actions cascade. The White Castle Duel decided to be far more freeing in this game. You have 12 actions to get everything you need done, but it still is very much an incredibly tight game. I should also note, by the way, this is different than the White Castle. Like, it definitely has similarities in the feel and structure of it, but it's a very different game. If you have the White Castle and you're like, well, I can just play that 2 players, this is a very different experience. Just vibes. Vibes are the same. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into this. I'm going to give you a general overview of the game and then give you my thoughts and opinions on it. Starting off with, this is the White Castle Duel. It is a 2-player game in which you are trying to get the most points at the end of 2 rounds. In each round, you're going to have 6 actions. There's a round in which you're placing things onto the board, and then a round in which you're taking things off the board, and all of those things you do are going to have cascading effects on them. So I'm going to start by showing you the way things operate, and then from there show you the way you get points, and that will hopefully give you a general idea of how the game works. The way you're going to do things is in round 1, you're going to have 2 of each of these towers over here, and you're going to place them on the board. So for example, let's say I want to go ahead and take this and place this on the board. I can place this on any of the 6 action spots over here. That's those little rectangles, squares, the squares over here. Those 6 action spots, I can place it down, but I cannot place it on the same color. So for example, I can't place this on black because, well, it's black. But I can place it on white, taking both actions on either side of the action spot. So this one's going to be these 2, this one's going to be these, this one's going to be these 2, this one's going to be these 2, and this one's going to be these 2. The hexagons and the pile of cards are going to be effectively the actions that you are taking. Once you place that down, before you take your action, again, remembering you cannot place in the same color, you are then going to activate whatever color you did place. So for example, I'm going to look back, I covered white, and because I covered white, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to take a pearl moving up 1 on that board. As you add cards to your rows over here, you're going to be able to, you're going to be able to do more with those action spots. So you kind of want to build those out to get as many of those bonus resources as you possibly can. Then you will then proceed with activating the 2 things on either side. So for example, I can go ahead and buy this card because I have these 2 favorite tiles over here. I'll trade them in to get this card, and we'll talk more about why you want these cards. I'll show you that part later. And then I'll do this action. This action allows me to pay food, which I don't actually have enough, but let's pretend I had food. Let me give myself a little bump over there. I'm going to pay 2 food in order to take one of my markers, placing it into the 2 food spot over here, and then again taking a pearl. There we go. That's going to be basically an action sequence. So in round 1, you place your tokens onto the board, making sure not to cover the same color. Then you activate the color you did cover in terms of the cards that you have plus your board. Then you take the actions on both spots. Another player can do the exact same thing, but they cannot use the color you use. So for example, over here, this player can take orange or even white, let's say. They can take white, which we just covered up, and place it on top of that, activating their black row. At which point I can take orange, activating it again, activating my white row again. You can only have 1 of each of the colors though in that row. Once you've done that, then that row is locked and you can no longer put things into that row. Then that's going to be round 1. Every player is going to place out 6 of the tokens, doing all the actions. So 2 actions plus activating resources. That's the structure of round 1. Round 2 is very similar, except this time you're pulling things off the board. So for example, if we had a few of these tiles out over here, let's place a few of these over here. When you're activating round 2, you're going to go ahead and look at these, and you're going to pull one off the board, putting it back on its matching color, activating those resources of the color you put down. Whatever color token you took is going to activate that color, and then you're going to again activate those action spots on either side. So a very similar structure, but this time the things players did in round 1 will influence our ability to take things in round 2, and in round 2 you could have more than 2 of the same color. You're not restricted. Feel free to lean into whatever row you most specialize in or whatever actions best help you in the game. Why are you doing this? Well, you're ultimately going to be trying to get points in the game. And there's a few ways you get points. First of all, there's the immediate benefit whenever you see this fan symbol. If I placed this person over here, I would have gotten a point moving up on this track. So whenever you move that, well, I guess it would have been the other player moving up on that track. So whenever you see points in the game, you're going to get the points as is. The other thing you're going to be doing for a lot of this, you're going to be collecting various symbols. And the symbols score in different ways. You're going to be collecting various banners. So over here, this card, when we take this card, you're going to pay the top left corner. You're going to get whatever's over here in the middle. And then later in the game, you'll have opportunities to flip these cards. Those are going to be different spots, but for example, if you place it over here, you can get to go ahead and flip one of your cards, and you now have those 2 banners. Those 2 banners are worth points based on how high you've managed to climb on these tracks. One of the actions in the game, specifically this action over here, allows you to pay those pearls over there, those shells, to move up these tracks, and if you manage to get all the way to the top, you get 3 points per banner, or 2 points per banner, or 1 point, depending on how far you got up the pathway. So basically, collect banners, move up these pathways, and score points for those banners. That's going to be one of the main ways you score. The other is going to be from the origami. You have white origami and you have black origami. So for example, over here, if we flip this card, we're going to get 2 blue origami. Additionally, if we place our tokens down in various spots, so if we had a token over here and a token over here, then we'd have 1, 2, 3 blue origami and 1, 2 white origami, and we'd multiply the 3 times the 2 and we'd get 6 points. Not super impressive, but you can you can, if you work at it, get like 25, 30 points out of it if you get a good multiplication going and getting a whole bunch of investments into those origami symbols. And then lastly, you're going to get, well, not lastly, but from the main ways, lastly, you're going to get points from collecting over here the helmets and the swords. Wherever you get those symbols, which over here, you can get them over here, you can get them over here. There's a few other areas over here. If you flip this card, we can get those on that side. And then over here, depending on how many multipliers you have in these regions, you're going to, for each region, for each soldier you have over here, you score 2 points per helmet. And for each soldier over here, you score 1 point per sword and 1 point per helmet. And again, you're getting that multiplication. So in all cases, you're trying to invest in multiple things in order to score the multiplication of different symbols, either having the soldiers over here in the dojo and then scoring based on the swords and helmets you have, or alternatively moving up the King's Palace track and then scoring for your flags, or alternatively scoring for your blue versus white origami in the game. There's a few other points going on, but those are the main areas. And to cover to a certain extent these 6 main actions you have in the game is, first of all, we have these 3 decks of cards, and then we have over here, this spot is where you can pay 2 or 5 iron to go into one of these 2 spots. Here you can pay 2 or 5 food to go into one of these 2 spots, getting the immediate benefit up top, and then the end game symbols down below. Over here, you can use this action to flip 2 of your cards that you bought in order to get their symbols. Over here, this action allows you to activate one of your rows, an extra way to get resources. This symbol allows you to climb the tracks, keeping in mind that as soon as you choose one track, the other player is compelled to choose the other side instead. So first player gets a little bit of dibs. And then this last action over here lets you take one of these 3 actions, either paying an extra resource to take any of the cards, or paying 2 resources of any kind to take that symbol, or 5 resources of any kind to take that symbol, and these will slowly reveal more as you go through these stacks of tokens. That is basically how you play the White Castle Duel. There's a few more odds and ends to it, but that's going to cover most of the things you're going to interact while playing through it. You're basically playing an action selection system where you place your pillars onto the board, activate those 2 actions, activate that color in order to get resources. Then in the second half, you're pulling them back, and you're trying to manage all your resources as well as your actions to most optimize your score in the game. Which brings me to our review of what I like, don't like, can see others not liking, and all of that, starting off with what I like. In general, this game is tight without being too tight, which, by the way, I will say I did feel the White Castle, the original game, was possibly a bit too tight. I like the game a lot, but that one felt a little bit more restrictive, or maybe I just wasn't as good at it. Either of those things are possible. This one feels like a good level of tight. You cannot get everything done in this game, but you can get a decent amount, and the way you build out your cards, the way you try to earn these cards over here, there's going to be a stack of these in this back row over here, or you can put them on top of the board, whatever, but there's various ways to earn these cards, adding more of these to your board to be able to get more and more rewards whenever you place things out or activate those columns. And so there's a lot of ways to earn resources in the game. There's a lot of ways to try to figure out which actions are you going to take to most work your way both towards the end game points as well as the in-game engine. You need resources to keep things flowing, but you ultimately need points, because otherwise if you just have resources and a whole lot of actions, you need those points to be able to actually score at the end of the game. And there's a lot of different pathways. I mean, there's a few main core pathways as far as what you're trying to do, but the way you choose to lean into one over another, as well as the way you get those extra peripheral points, there's a lot of choices to be made as far as what you're trying to do. Moving from here to over here is very easy. Getting 2 points per flag, moving your way all the way to the top can cost you a lot of pearls over here. It's going to be a very expensive journey, but if you do that and you get a ton of flags, again, I've seen players score 30 plus points from their flags for fully investing in that track. Get 10 flags, 3 points per flag. It's hard, but if you work your way towards it, you can do so, and that'll be half your score in the game. So there's a lot of incentive to try to really focus on one particular path and go for it. And it feels satisfying. The nature of those 12 actions on its own feels a little limiting, but the fact that every action does so many things. Every time you play something out, you're getting resources, but you're also getting 2 different actions. And if you ever can't take an action or don't want to, you do have this kind of well action, which is a little bit of a wild, do one of these 4 things, which early game in particular can be very helpful. It also gives you access to these tokens, and those are incredibly useful. These allow you to switch the positions of 2 action symbols over here, giving you a lot more flexibility, especially when once a spot is locked and you can no longer go into it this round, which, considering there's only 2 rounds in this game, once 3 actions have been taken in a spot, you functionally can't do that spot anymore, which I guess is a little tricky. Over here there's a few more ways, but any of these other actions, these 4 actions over here, you can only activate 3 times in a round, which means 6 times the whole game, which means that this limits what you can do unless you use those action tokens to swap them around, which gives you more tools. One of the things I love about the game is the variability to it. This board might look fairly static, but these tokens move around wherever you want, and the starting set is going to be different. The color of these is going to be different. The stacks of cards and the order of the cards in them is going to be very different. These tokens over here, these are basically the rewards you take for going there, and there's 4 different ones for each side, which again gives you more variety to what you're doing. These reward tokens over here, they're double-sided, they go into one side or the other, and there's 2 more in the box, which again, it gives you more variety. These, you can swap these however you want, putting those in the right color and the right side. Again, more variety. The order of these tokens over here, that on top is going to be a very different game than not having it directly available and driving your actions and your decision, your strategy forward. So there's a lot of variety to the setup of the game, to the way the game is overall structured, while still giving you that core tightness to the experience. It's just very rewarding to have a plan, work your way towards it, feels like it's tight, but then you slowly open up those doors and get more done. And building out your row of cards over here, that is incredibly satisfying. Get a bunch of cards out here early, and your resource pool, you will not be nearly as resource starved as your opponent if you invest into a few of these cards as fast as possible, which is also a great tangent to the very first thing I don't like, which is sometimes you can't really get those. Which you'd have to know more about the game to know this, but looking at this board right now, there's currently no way to get these cards. And how often and how to get more of these, how often and how frequently you can get them does heavily depend on what's in play. For example, just to give you a few small changes we can make to the game setup, they'll give you a whole lot more of these. If this was in play, instead of that, you can now go over here to get one of those cards, adding it to your tableau. On the other hand, over here, if we had this symbol instead of this symbol, there you go, there's another way to get those cards and add them to your tableau. If this card was on top instead of the other card, we'd have another way to get those and add them to your tableau. If this card was over here, we'd have another way. So over here, a few random swaps of the things that go on the board do completely change the accessibility of how frequently you can get cards, adding them to your engine. And don't get me wrong, you're all playing on a level playing field if there just aren't a lot of those available. Granted, by the way, while some of those things are not going to change once you start playing, the decks of cards over here, as you go through the cards, you will slowly have access to more and more of those symbols. So they will show up in different places, meaning you're guaranteed, well, not guaranteed, you're almost guaranteed to have access to a certain number of those as you go through the decks of cards, but the general availability, especially from an early on standpoint, can be drastically different, and those cards, getting a few of those cards in play, you start with one, but outside of that one, getting a few, the difference between having one of those cards and having 3 totally changes the resource game. And yes, again, you are playing on a level playing field, but I just want to do more in games. And so the fact that both me and my opponent are doing less doesn't make the experience better. I want to feel like I can get a little bit more done. So I'd say that for me personally, when I play the game, if there aren't a few of those available at the beginning, I rearrange some things until there are a few of those available at the beginning for both players to partake in and start building their engine and their resource pool a little better. On a similar note, a little different, but a similar complaint, these decks of cards can become a little static if they aren't particularly useful for one player or another. These cards can be incredibly helpful at times. They absolutely can be. They're a big part of the game strategy, and I love the variety of those popping up at different points. It keeps the game fresh and interesting as new cards continue to show up. But there will certainly be points in the game, or at least there have been in some of the games I've played, where the cards aren't as useful right now for both the 2 players, and then there's no easy way to really clear them, and at some point you'll just take them for the symbols and the flipping, but if they're not as useful to your particular strategy, these can become a little static. I wish there was a better way to clear them if they were static, so that you can get to the next cards. That's the only other real complaint I have as far as how the game can stall depending on the cards in play. As far as I can see others not liking, I will say if you are not a fan of the White Castle, if you don't like games that are tight, this is a game that's tight. Now, that comes with a caveat, because I don't like games that are too tight. I want to be able to do, I don't want to feel like every single action is number crunched to the nth degree. This one definitely is number crunched, but it feels, to me, it feels just tight enough that I really enjoy what it's doing without feeling too constricted, with the caveat that I cheat a little to make sure those cards are in play. But I will say, if you don't like games that are tight at all, this is definitely I mean, you have 12 actions. You have 12 actions the whole game. Every action matters. What you do with those actions matter. Early game, you're going to be looking at the board trying to figure out, can I do these things? And the answer for some of them is going to be no. It's not unusual for your first action in the game to include one well action, because you just don't have the resources and the engine built up to fully take advantage of the board as you're playing through it. So it's a tight game. It's a tight game, and it can be a mean game. It's a mean game where your opponents are taking the actions away from you. This is a direct head-to-head game. You might be working your way towards that perfect action pool, and your opponent takes the last action, blocking you out of it. You can absolutely get stuck in this game. You can absolutely get stuck not being able to do the things you want to do that are essential for your strategy, because your opponent got there first, took that last action. And yes, there are tools. Again, you can cash these in over here to move actions around, but that means you're spending a resource that you otherwise could have spent something else. It's a tight game. Your opponents can get in the way. You have to be okay with a little bit of cutthroatness in this experience. As far as final thoughts go, I overall really enjoy the White Castle Duel. And I will say I walked in a little hesitant, because as much as I enjoyed the White Castle, I expected to kind of like this and then be, okay, it's the White Castle with 2 players. And it's just a drop more open for me. A drop more open in a way that I find more rewarding than the White Castle is. And White Castle is a good game, to be very clear. I think the White Castle is a game that rewards every single action as you play through it. I have not played through the expansion of it, I'll say that. But the base game is just a tight engine. This one feels a little bit more free. I think one of my main criticisms of the White Castle was the fact that with only 9 actions, and with certain actions inherently structured towards your resource engine, I felt that the first 2 or 3 actions were almost, not necessarily scripted, but a little bit more in a certain direction, and then from there you had 6 actions to free the game up. This one feels more open from the get-go. It feels like there's 12 actions instead of 9, and that I don't feel as pushed into the first starting actions quite as much. Overall, this is a clever game design. It feels familiar to the White Castle while being different enough that it's certainly worth checking out both, or possibly owning both, and it feels very rewarding in the action system, as well as the variety of the way the game is set up, and therefore the variety of the experience you'll have as you try to optimize each individual board game state. I'm coming in at a 4 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, definitely check out the White Castle. If you like this game, I think you should check out the White Castle. And separately from that, I'll give you 2 more recommendations, because the White Castle feels like a gimme. Check out Revive. In terms of the tightness of everything you do, the variety of the game state while being pretty straightforward in the actions itself, I think Revive is going to give you a strong, longer experience than this one that plays well at 2, 3, and 4 players. It also plays well solo, I'll say that as well. And then also check out Paris Le Citadelier. A very different game experience, but for me, that's a solid 2-player game in which it feels like you almost have that same head-to-head experience as far as every single action and every single choice I make being one that you could take away from me at any given point. I felt the same strategy decisions while being a very different game. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.